Hello there, it's me, Leon, recording this part on Saturday. Why am I recording this on Saturday? Nobody asked. Well, it's simple. In the next coming week, there's going to be another piece of discourse about police and shooting people and whether if it's justified or not, because I know in the wake of the Sonia Massey shooting, there's all this discourse, so I thought I'd let you know beforehand that there's going to be even more discourse about it, but instead of it pertaining to cops shooting women who rebuke them in the name of Jesus, it's about cops apparently shooting a 4-year-old, and if you listen to the people on TikTok, they will make it seem like they just gunned down a random 4-year-old.
Next week, body cam footage of police shooting and killing a 4-year-old black boy in his home after his mom called the cops because she had just been SA'd and stabbed is going to be released. And the child that the police murdered is Sonia Massey's cousin.
Just want everybody to know, next to nobody has been able to confirm that these two individuals, Terrell Miller and Sonia Massey, are biological cousins. And no, saying they are as close as cousins does not fucking count.
I've got to hurry up and get ready to go out, but I have to talk about this. A family member of Sonia Massey, I think it was her cousin, called the cops because somebody in her house SA'd her and stabbed her. And as you can guess, the cops end up unaliving a completely innocent person. This time, it's a 4-year-old boy. He's a child of the woman who called the cops in the first place on the man who was still in the house who stabbed and SA'd her. Body cam footage is coming out next week. If no one can convince me that they're not targeting this family at this point, how can this happen twice in a row?
What happened to Terrell Miller is worse than I could have imagined, and I have some more details.
First, Sonia Massey and Terrell Miller were not blood cousins, but they were as close as cousins. But we do believe that the police department waited until Sonia Massey's information came out before they announced what happened to the police officer that unalived Terrell Miller. The shooting of the 4-year-old boy happened way back in March, and they investigated all the way up until July 6th. Sonia Massey's shooting was July 8th. After her body cam footage came out and her police officer was convicted, then they announced that Terrell Miller's shooter was not going to be prosecuted in any way. Terrell's mother did not call the cops. The cops were responding to noise complaints in the apartment building. They approached the apartment building. They found some blood on the ground in the common area and approached the apartment that was making the most noise. They saw Terrell's mother bleeding on the ground. Then they saw the man who was walking around with a knife. After seeing the cop, that man decides to hold Terrell Miller hostage by holding a knife to his neck. And without any regard to the boy's safety, the cop decides to shoot through Terrell to shoot the man holding him hostage, unaliving them both. This cop got off scot-free. They do not believe he did anything wrong or unlawful, shooting through a child to get to a man. Another horrifying detail I found was that after Terrell was born, his mother used to have reoccurring nightmares about cops bursting in her apartment, unaliving them both.
I hate to break it to you, sweetheart. That's not a detail. That's justified paranoia that, in a circumstance, you could die. Pretty sure everybody has that type of fear in regards to something or someone.
Unfortunately, the tragic case of Sonia Massey isn't the only case of the police force in Illinois violently unaliving a black person after they were called to help said black person. And heartbreakingly enough, Sonia Massey and this other victim of police violence that I want to talk about today even knew one another. 4-year-old Terrell Miller lived in Macomb, Illinois when his life was cut short only a few months ago. The police was called due to domestic violence situation and a hostage situation. According to them, when they arrived at Terrell's mom's place, they saw her wounded on the floor. Then they saw the perpetrator come out of another room with Terrell in front of him. He was using Terrell as a human shield. So now imagine that multiple officers, trained officers supposedly, in one room with one perpetrator who was holding a 4-year-old in front of him. The perpetrator was also actively threatening Terrell, being like, if you come any closer, I will harm Terrell. Put yourself into that situation and think about what you would have done as an officer. Well, Lieutenant Nick Gogg's solution was to use his firearm. And he used it in a way that, the bullet would go through Terrell into the perpetrator, unaliving them both. Let me repeat myself. They were called to free this 4-year-old little boy. And what they did was unalive him to get to the perpetrator. By the way, Lieutenant Gogg was cleared of any wrongdoing. So yes, he's still a lieutenant, he still has a firearm, and he still has the power to do whatever he wants after he purposely unalived a 4-year-old to get to a suspect. This is why law enforcement does whatever it wants right now, because they know they will get away with a lot of things. And they also know a lot of things will be covered up. For example, we are not allowed to see the body cam footage. It's not going to be released anytime soon. They are being very hush-hush about a lot of the details of this case. And they were also waiting for the body cam footage of the Sonia Massey case to be released to then, update the Terrell Miller case. because they knew that the Sonia Massey case, because of its virality, would overshadow whatever they would release about Terrell. How should anybody feel safe enough to call the police? How should a black person feel safe enough to call the police when something like this will always be a possibility? And in the beginning, I said that Sonia Massey and Terrell knew one another. And they did. They were acquaintances. They saw one another at, family gatherings, friend gatherings, whatever. And now imagine you're somebody who's also connected to these two people. You lost both of them to police violence in only a few months. This is the reality for a lot of black parents before their children are even born. Before their kids have ever even taken their first breath, the parents have to worry about potential police brutality and potential police violence, especially when they live in certain places, like, Terrell's mom did. And now her biggest fear has come true. Not only that, but her son's unaliver still has a job and will never face any type of consequences for his actions. We need to talk about this case, and we need to make sure as many people as possible know about this case, and we need to ask for justice. Not just ask, we need to demand it, because we have every right to see somebody who unalived a 4-year-old behind bars forever.
However, if we were to look at an article written on July 23rd about said shooting, there was a special prosecutor or a state investigator that reviewed the footage and said that no charges should be filed in the police shooting in Macomb that killed 2 people, including a young child. In a letter to McDonough County State's Attorney Matt Kowalka, Special Prosecutor Jonathan Bernard of the Appellate Prosecutor's Office said that he has reviewed police reports, audio, and video recordings of the shooting and training records. He said he also reviewed use of force protocols, applicable statutes, and case law. Bernard found that there's no basis for any criminal action or prosecution that is supportable under the facts of this case against any of the officers involved in this tragic incident. Terrell Miller, who was 4 years old, and Anthony George, who was 57, died in a shooting on March 6th. The initial investigation by Illinois State Police found both suffered gunshot injuries after police officer fired 1 shot from his firearm. 2 officers were sent to an apartment in the 900 block of North Charles Street at around 10 p.m. on a domestic violence call. The officers said that they forced their way into the apartment and saw a 36-year-old woman bleeding from numerous stab wounds. They also saw George armed with a knife. He refused to comply with several commands to drop the weapon. George then ducked out of view before reemerging. He was holding the child in front of him with a knife to the child's throat and another around the waist. The officer then fired a shot. The woman was taken to McDonough District Hospital in Macomb. The 2 officers were placed on leave. Court records showed George was charged with domestic battery and bodily harm in a case last fall. He pleaded guilty, paid a fine, and was credited 35 days he spent in jail. Now, class, what's important to know is that we can all read articles about this, and we could all either laugh or think about the takes being made on social media. What needs to be addressed is that at some point this week, we will see the body cam footage. It will apparently be made public so everybody could have their own look at it to see what conversations will come up about it. Some people are saying that the body cam footage will be released to the public on Monday, but I'm not certain of that. I will just wait and see. But as it's been described, it seems as if this is justified given the circumstances, but the body cam footage will be the thing to certify that or not. So let's all wait and see.
The following video contains information and video footage of an officer-involved shooting with officers from the Macomb Police Department. The video is being provided to the public in commitment to transparency and public interest. It should be noted that the incident was investigated by the Illinois State Police, and an internal investigation was conducted by the Macomb Police Department. The video and information contained herein does not draw conclusions on the actions of the officers or whether or not their conduct was in compliance with Illinois law and departmental policy. The video you see is taken from body-worn cameras. Body-worn cameras don't always capture everything the officer observes, nor do they capture what the officer was perceiving at the time. Conversely, body-worn cameras may capture moments that officers don't observe. Although these tools are effective in assisting with evidence collection, we are reminding the public that an incident cannot be judged based solely on what is recorded through body-worn video. Some video images have been redacted to preserve victim privacy, as well as victim names and addresses. At about 10:03 p.m. on March 16, 2024, officers are dispatched to multiple 911 calls, reporting an active domestic situation. One caller thinks they may have heard gunshots. Officers arrive within 3 minutes. Officers gain access to the east side stairwell and are met by a person who ushers the officers inside and points upstairs.
Macomb Police, open the door. Huh? Macomb Police, open the door.
Officers announce their presence and order the occupants to open the door.
Huh?
Officers hear screams for help. A distressed female subject could be heard yelling, "He's stabbing me."
Let me see your hands! Let me see your hands!
Officers force entry into the apartment.
Get out! My son!
A Macomb police officer discharged a single bullet. We'll stop the video at this point out of respect for the deceased's family members. Following the discharge of the officer's firearm, the threat ended. Officers began rendering aid and called for medical personnel. Both the child and the suspect were pronounced deceased at the scene. We'll take a moment now to review additional details of the incident. When officers arrived on the scene, note the presence of blood on the walls of the stairwell.
Macomb Police, open the door.
After identifying themselves and ordering occupants to open the door, a female subject could be heard yelling, "He's stabbing me." Officers then forced their way into the apartment after identifying themselves. The officer points their issued firearm at the naked adult male, identifies himself as police, and issues lawful commands to see the suspect's hands.
Let me see your hands! Let me see your hands!
The officer orders the female with injuries out of the home to safety. What happens next transpires in a matter of seconds, so we'll slow and stop the video occasionally for additional clarity and detail. Notice during the confrontation we can observe a knife in the suspect's left hand. We'll highlight the weapons when present, as they're only visible for a short time during the incident. The suspect then lunges out of sight and a child is heard screaming. The suspect eventually reappears with a knife in each hand, holding the child to his chest, one knife around the child's waist and one around the child's throat. It should be noted this adult male is identified as the suspect. A Macomb officer discharged a single bullet. The threat ended. Officers began rendering aid and called for medical personnel. Both the child and the suspect were pronounced deceased at the scene.
Now, it's Monday evening, and that was very uncomfortable to watch. However, I do take issue with the amount of people who have been running around social media making it seem like these officers just willy-nilly shot a 4-year-old, when that's not what happened based on that body cam footage. And I know because of what I've shown you in this video, there's going to be the comparison game that takes place where individuals will try to wordsmith you without showing you anything and say the situation with Terrell Miller is the exact same with Sonia Massey, and that couldn't be further from the fucking truth. In one instance, you have officers in the spur of the moment having to react to somebody potentially killing another human inside of a room and having to take action, and in the spur of stupid movements by the person who's holding a child by the neck at knife point, they had to react very fast, and unfortunately, a child was hit with a bullet. That's not, they just popped a child with a gun. That's dishonest for people to say. And in comparison to Sonia Massey, you have complete fucking incompetence from the cops, from the initial getting to the pot to the pulling out a gun in the name of rebuking people by Jesus to putting a bullet in somebody's head over water being thrown at them or otherwise, and then acting as if, nah, the bitch is just crazy and don't try to administer any medical aid whatsoever. That's the difference, and there's a reason why that motherfucker is being charged and none of these officers are. Now, that weird corner of the court of public opinion is going to completely circumvent that body cam footage and try to get on social media and tell you of 15,000 different ways the cops could have handled this better, and I'm here to let you know that's next to fucking impossible.
Because they didn't show the shot. They had a lot of that blurred, which I'm glad he did that, because that probably gave me restless nights. But what was his reaction after the shot? I didn't hear any remorse because they cut ahead. Because they was trying to give aid. They showed them trying to give aid. But I just want to hear, was he trying to, did he give remorse? Did he panic, feel a little frantic, anything? Was there any emotions there at all? Did it hit him that his inability or his lack of action caused a 4-year-old boy to lose his life?
I would like to ask the court, what is defined as a lack of action? Because when I think lack of action and law enforcement, I'm thinking they're not showing any concern for the situation whatsoever. And based off of that footage, that is a blatant lie. One could even argue that the cops took appropriate action once they started hearing a woman screaming bloody murder.
So the Terrell Miller footage was just released. I'm not going to play it here because, quite frankly, there's no need to. That poor baby was screaming for help before they shot and killed him. Like, at what point does this end? At what point do people not realize that we need police reform? Our system is broken if that's the best response to that situation, because, like, that baby was screaming. They knew that baby was there in that man's arms, and they shot anyways. Shot anyways, just without hesitating, without thinking twice. They just did it.
Very unfortunate for you, Miss Pie in the Sky. They can't necessarily hesitate given the fact that they know, one, someone's in there screaming bloody murder. Two, they know that the person who is the perpetrator has a weapon, who also has a child in their hands. And three, the suspect is running back and forth, hiding behind corridors and walls, and then immediately popping back out. You don't know what they're going to do in that moment, so you gotta take action. And again, unfortunately, that action had to result in a child dying because not the cops were just looking to shoot somebody or, oh, the child screamed out for help and they just shot him. It's because the piece of shit had the kid up to his face and started running like he was Sonic the Hedgehog.
Clearly hearing him screaming, seeing him in the man's arms, and they did it. And they're not being charged for it.
And they don't need to be.
How? How are you not being charged for that?
So, I watched the body cam footage of Terrell Miller's death, murder, and then I called the Macomb Police Department because I didn't know what else to do. They told me I was being hostile for demanding to know why the officer had not been fired. And then, when the very pleasant lady was like, I'm gonna disconnect the phone because you're being hostile, I just started screaming that they killed a baby because of who the fuck. I'm sorry. I'm still shaking. I'm still crying. Who kills a baby? I'm ready to every police station. This is horrific, and it shouldn't happen anywhere. And a baby shouldn't be shot by the cops, and babies shouldn't be dying in Palestine, and babies.
Okay, clearly this is the ramblings of a white woman who clearly doesn't step outside to realize that life doesn't revolve around her. And I do enjoy the fact that she's sitting here trying to paint the police department as ignorant people who don't care by claiming that she's hostile. Then she starts describing herself as a hostile individual. And I don't understand how, so far in your reaction to this, you have not acknowledged once that, the baby was being held at knife point up to someone's face as a human shield. Stop wording this like the cops just broke down the door and saw a baby and got trigger happy.
Just fucked. And every one of you thin blue line freaks, go rot. Because that little boy would be alive today if it wasn't for those fucking pigs. I'm ready for the marches. Let me know. When we're burning shit down, I'm done.
Yes, Susie, incriminate yourself like that, because once shit hits the fan and they start looking at who was inciting what, they're going to be knocking on your door probably second or third. But to address your thin blue line freak accusation, first of all, racist for assuming what I like to do with my thin lines. And number two, which is the most important part, that child would not be dead if a piece of shit didn't hold him up as a human shield and start running running around as a way to try to deflect from the fact that they got cops pointing guns at him. They did not point a gun at a 4-year-old. They were looking for him because they got the call. He fits the description based on a woman yelling out for help, and he's the bitch that had a kid up as a human shield. What's pissing me off about these people is that they acknowledge they saw the body cam footage, but they're still openly lying about what it is they saw, making it seem like the cop just burst in the room, saw everything, and then stopped what he was doing to just shoot a 4-year-old. And that did not fucking occur. And the thing that irks me is people will sit there and pine and whine and groan and moan for all this information, to see the body cam footage, to see all the details so that they could deduce what is justified and what is not. And then they see it and they continue to fucking lie about it. Because in that scenario where you're dealing with a domestic violence call and somebody in the house is screaming and you burst in and you see a motherfucker running around and another one holding a kid at knife point, you are in a stressful situation. And when you got your guns drawn, a sudden movement is going to let a bullet fly. And unfortunately, a child was being used as a fucking human shield in order to protect a scumbag who clearly didn't want to go where he was going to end up going, which is hell and jail. And now, unfortunately, a kid is dead, but that's not because of police incompetence. That's because a dumb fuck pussy wanted to use a kid as a human shield. I hope people say that part more instead of just trying to blame this on the cops. And again, for the people who want to try to compare this to Sonia Massey, I will sit here and tell you again, there is no reason for a gun to be drawn because a lady said, "I rebuke you in the name of Jesus." That's police incompetence. This is just what you got to do as a cop. And unfortunately, somebody might get used as a human shield. And that's not the cop's fault. That's the piece of shit who's doing it fault. But yeah, I agree with the investigator who I brought up at the beginning of the video. These officers should not be charged. They, based on the rules and circumstances and the evidence of the body cam footage, were doing what they had to do and was the proper response. It is not their fault that a piece of shit was using a child as a human shield, decided to duck off into a corner, and then run back around thinking he might get a leg up on officers with a gun. And if there's anything else to say, lead credence to the further proof that you never bring a knife to a gunfight because you're going to lose. And may Terrell Miller rest in absolute peace. And the piece of shit who wanted to use him as a human shield, I hope you rest in absolute piss. That's all I got. Goodbye.